All right. Give me the sign. Good afternoon, my friends. The doctor's in the house. Welcome to another episode of To Your Health with Dr. G. My name is Dr. Mark Gomez. Again, people call me Dr. G. And welcome again. Today, I have a great group of guests today. We're going to be talking about the theme of when is enough enough, balancing self-care and caregiving. Again, my name is Dr. Mark Gomez. Again, Dr. G. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My handle is To Your Health, Dr. G. Also, check me out on my website at www.drmarkgomez.com. This episode is brought to you by our exclusive sponsor, Gold Level, Orvos Healthcare. www.orvoshealthcare.com. So today we're going to talk about balancing self-care and caregiving. But before we talk into that, I want to hit you with a quick disclaimer. The content of To Your Health with Dr. G is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and that the content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, and or treatment. Further details can be found at https://www.toyourhealthwithdrg.com #disclaimer. All right. So we're going to talk about a topic today that's important to all of us, something that we can all relate to: balancing self-care and caregiving. We are born, we live, and we die. That is the quintessential human existence. But what defines those kind of things is our relationships. And today I've gathered a group of experts to talk about this. So for newcomers to the show, each week I host a group of my friends and medical experts and healthcare experts, and we talk about different topics that are relatable to people that are listening to the show, but just people like us. We are nothing more than we're just human beings. We're individuals. This group of the panel today, we're parents. We go through life just like everybody else. I always joke around and say we put underwear on one leg at a time. And what I want to happen today is that I don't want people to take away that healthcare practitioners are unreachable. Sometimes when we think about health and healthcare from the patient's perspective, there may be a thought that doctors and nurses are always at you from a full arm's length away. And really what we want to talk about is how to break down those barriers and talk about how can we build long-lasting health, longevity, vitality. And going through talking about self-care and caregiving is something that is innate to us. So what I want to do is I want to introduce my guests today. And these guests today are just excellent individuals. They have a wealth of experience, years of knowledge, and can all relate to the aspects of balancing self-care and caregiving. My first guest is Sean Schuster. He's sitting to my right. And Sean, he and I have known each other for a long time. We actually played golf on a number of occasions, and our golf balls did not find the fairway. Let me be honest about that one. But I've known Sean for about a decade now, and Sean's been a great friend. He's an excellent professional. Sean is representing residential home care and hospice, and I've known Sean and his company and his brand for a long time, and Sean's got a wealth of experience on what it's like to be in the caregiving mode. So Sean, go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Mark. Appreciate the kind words. Unfortunately, our golf game hasn't gotten much better. Balls are still flying all over the place.
It's bad.
Yeah. But like Mark said, I'm the vice president of residential home health and hospice here we're based out of Downers Grove, but we see most of our patients in DuPage County. I've been with residential for a little over 8 years now, and really just have a passion about helping patients and giving back to the community, and really just making sure that that population that needs the help in the home, especially after they leave the hospital, gets the care that they deserve, and really trying everything we can, working in conjunction with our physician partners to make sure that those patients get everything they need.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about home health in a little bit, and it's a topic that everybody can resonate with, because the way that I see it, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase an old professor of mine who always said that there are two kingdoms when it comes to health and wellness. There's a kingdom of the well, and there's a kingdom of the sick. And a lot of time in life, we go back and forth from one kingdom to the next kingdom, from the healthy kingdom to the sick kingdom. But at some point, we end up buying our one-way ticket to the sick. My next guest is Mr. Chad Earl. And Chad and I, you guys met Chad last week, those that tuned in last week. Chad and I go back a long time. I shared that story of an embarrassing story of me in my underwear in Chad's locker room, almost passed out the first time I met him, because I thought I was pretty good. And then I realized, my working out, I thought I was good. And then I said, man, I got to put in some more work. So, but Chad gave us some great insights on longevity last week. So I invited him back to talk about the balance of self-care and caregiving. So Chad, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listening audience and our viewing audience.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. I just want to say I've been personal training for about 20 years, and personal training can take on a lot of different types of connotations in the public, but basically we're talking about investment and self-investment. And some individuals might think that level of time that you would spend and resource on yourself to be selfish, but a healthier individual is an individual that can contribute more, provide more encouragement, provide more support for their family members, improve their leadership roles in their networks. And so seeing people that invest in themselves first has a tremendous value for their entire network and relationships as a whole. So I kind of want to speak on that and the importance of that over time.
And we talked about last week about laying down a sound foundation. And that sound foundation in health is, of course, starting out by getting a physical. Where are you at? You must establish the fact that you're not dying in order to then start living. Mm-hmm. My last guest here today is Mr. Larry Love, and I also invited him back from last week's episode. And Larry is just a great gentleman. He's a professional, and he's an expert on really trying to find out the balance between self-care and caregiving. So, Larry, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listening and viewing audience.
Thanks, Dr. G, for having me on the show again. Again, my name's Larry Love. I'm a sports medicine specialist, and what's interesting about that is when individuals are rehabbing from an injury, or they're going through a particular phase of rehab, they go through different phases of sometimes how they feel with depression, denial, other situations, maybe anger, but the last one is acceptance. And with that being said, it's important the care that's given to them. You also realize you're taking on their energy. So with that being said, I'm very interested to partake in this discussion, because the things that we take on as caregivers or providers is as well as congruent to what the athlete or the patient is dealing with. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Larry. So let's talk about this continuum of life. We are born. We are cared for after we're born. We're cared for until we probably get to our teenage, maybe early 20s. And then we have an investment and a realization, an awareness of self-care. Then we go through life and we start our careers, and then we may settle down and start a family. Then we have to start caregiving again. And then we go through life even more while we're trying to maintain self-care and caregiving for our kids. And at the same time, the generation before us is getting older. And at some point, that generation needs to be cared for. But then we go through life again. We get older. And then now, eventually, the tides turn and we start getting cared for as we end up towards the end of our lives. And I really want people to understand that we want to really set the foundation to, how do you want to define those last 10 years if you had it? Do you want to define those last 10 years of living, if you had a choice of living full with life and vigor and vitality and going to birthday parties for your grandchildren or going to celebrations with your spouse? Or do you want to live those last 10 years in a hospital, sick, taking a lot of medications, seeing a lot of doctors? And what we're really trying to tell today is that we do have choice. There are ways to design that, and I'm going to ask Chad to talk about that a little bit. But I want to make sure that the message today is that yes, we are talking about broad topics. Self-care and caregiving are very broad, but we're going to try to give some concrete examples. Again, this group of people here, myself included, we're parents, we're professionals, we're sons, and I think we can all speak on that kind of volume, and this kind of talk resonates. So what I want to do, I want to start with Chad. And Chad, I want you to just kind of give me your thought on, like, how about why don't we start with some concrete examples? Like, what does self-care mean to you?
Well, Dr. Gomez, if I had to break it down into some objective aspects, I would look at it as a design that's looking to improve three basic pillars. It'd be your mental, emotional, and physical. And like you commented, when you start out in life, you spend a lot of time in mental development with education and getting emotionally molded through your parents and family relationships. And a lot of people say, bro, I really enjoyed my youth. And really what they're talking about is having a unique societal investment. When you look at kids, everybody in their immediate network is investing in them. Their teachers, their parents, their coaches, their ministers, everybody is interested in encouraging them. And then you get into teenage years and you try to find your passion, try to find your vision, but still, as a rural society, is supportive, and your physical health is kind of innate, and you're spending a lot of time in that front half of your life finding out a mental picture that you can really invest your talents in. And then when you look at that midlife, you start to observe some physical decline and some emotional changes as you lose that network that has invested so readily into you. And so in that midlife, you have to then switch from a enormous priority of mental development more into emotional and physical framing. And that shift in individuals can be traumatic because, I mean, you've had your parents, you've had your friends, you've had coaches, teachers, parents, all investing, all encouraging you. And now they can move away by either location, if you move and take a job, by death, by simply graduation. All your mentorship, all this enormous amount of support is gone, and you're competing while you're aging, and you're kind of on this island, and you're noticing these health declines. And so you really have to understand, when it talks about self-care, to put in place these emotional and physical designs as you're aging, establishing good adult friendships, establishing physical health behaviors and priorities to really allow you that robust living as you're aging.
Thanks, Chad. And I like what you were saying about establishing those relationships. Comes back to some of our foundations. Even as we talked in the past, having those relationships are one of the key characteristics that allow for that longevity. Again, when we talked about in the past, and those of us that are new, we talked about blue zone populations. And one of the things that blue zone populations have in common is the relationship, and never underestimate the importance of those relationships. Sean, I want to ask you some questions because Sean's got a unique take on things, because Sean, again, being a parent, he can speak volumes on what it's like to raise children. But from a professional standpoint, Sean has a really big background in the home care delivery modeling and creating that. And as he talked about earlier, when people leave the hospital setting and then they go home, that can be a challenge. It can have some successes or it can have some inherent failures. Mm-hmm. And so maybe, Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about success that you might see, or even cases of like challenges or failures in somebody going home. We talked about having the relationship, so you need support. And it might be hard if somebody goes home from the hospital and maybe they're elderly, mm-hmm. and they might be 80 years old, and then they have an elder spouse, mm-hmm. and all the grown kids are out of state. And how do you make that work?
Yeah.
What kind of resources are there?
Well, there's a ton of resources out there in the community. That's typically in a situation like that, we would get a social worker involved, and there'd be some communication with whatever setting that we saw the patient in last, whether it was a hospital setting or a nursing facility. I would say that the biggest success that we see as a professional home care company and the success in the outcome of our patients is when there's a strong family dynamic. When patients are going home and they have a loving family, and whether it's son or daughters or nieces and nephews or siblings that are healthy, when they have that support system, we just see much better outcomes. It's just across the board. On the reverse side, but not everybody has that support system, right? No matter what happened in their life, and they may be going home alone, or they may be going home and their spouse is just as
sick sometimes.
Yeah, just as sick as them. So we have to do more for those patients. But yeah, as a community, just kind of work together and make sure that patient is receiving everything that they can, from a medical standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and then a nurturing standpoint as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Larry and I were talking. This reminds me what some of the words that you said. Larry and I were talking recently about having expectations. When you look at expectations versus responsibilities as we go through the aging and life cycle. Larry, do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. It's so important to note, even with self-care, that it evolves. It evolves based on the stage that you are in life. So from 0 to 20, your responsibilities versus the expectations are pretty low. You got someone taking care of you. As you get into your 20 to 40 year age range and lifespan, now your responsibilities start to become a little bit more aggressive. Your expectation of some of the things you want to do in life, evolve to a little bit more specifics. As we get to that 40 to 60 year range, now we begin to look at, hey, you know what? Some of the responsibilities may start to decrease just a little bit. You're expecting to maybe travel more, kind of lay a little bit more low with, having so much responsibility with the family. And then once we get to that 60 to 80 year range, and God willing that you're living, the one thing is we're expecting to have not a lot of responsibility, and we're expecting to, just kind of live a quality of life that if we need to be taken care of, somebody can do that. So I think it's really important to note that self-care it evolves based on the stage you are in life.
Well, I want to give a little more couple kind of real world examples of self-care. So a lot of times when we think of self-care, we think of, all right, well, I'm going to go get a massage, I'm going to get a manicure. But self-care can come in even more simpler forms than that. Self-care can just be those first 5 to 10 minutes in the morning that you have to yourself while your spouse is asleep and the kids are asleep still. And you just spend 5 to 10 minutes yourself in the bathroom, not doing a number 2, not doing that.
Where are we going with this?
That's it. I don't know where I'm going with this, but follow me. Actually, I do know where I'm going with this. But those 5 to 10 minutes yourself where you can actually just really properly set the tone for your day. Reading a book, going for a walk, practicing mindfulness, listening to that favorite song that you have that you never get a chance to listen to. Sometimes just waking up 5 to 10 minutes earlier can really set the tone for your day. And that is an example of self-care.
Absolutely.
Chad, you want to comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah, because I think people, when you say these terms, it's kind of esoteric and somebody's like, I'm not sure if that pertains to me. Do I understand? And at the most basic level, self-care, it starts with your narrative. What do you believe the day holds for you, and what do you believe you can add to it? Are people against me? Are people for me? So they're going to be positive. Am I going to get healthier? Do I have loving relationships? Do I not? And then no matter what the day presents itself with, you're taking the stimulus a certain way. And so, like you said, reading the book, taking in a proper meditative position. I do that a lot because the research does show that most of stress is perceived. Things happen to every single person, but for some people, these routine occurrences are traumatic. And other people are like, you know what? Hey, I got in a fender bender, but I'm okay. Some people, oh my God, my car, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is, and so these same occurrences, that it's called life. And we know it happens. We have insurance, we have history. So we know that certain things are going to present themselves. And so it's very important then to understand and position yourself with the right support, with the right mental frame, with the right physical routine. As Larry talked about, you're getting older. What changes between 20 to 80? Well, I got to slow down. Understand that. But what does your diet look like now? What does your exercise routine look like now? As you talked about earlier, what do your friendships consist of? You can't play basketball anymore with the guys. So what, you just don't relate to anybody? Do you move to golf? Do you move to a certain volunteer group? And so these are all things that when we talk about self-care, as Larry said, and it evolves, your whole structure needs to shift to accommodate and maintain your happiness.
So
Go ahead.
yeah,
Charlie.
so I kind of like what you said there, where before we got in here talking to you, when I hear self-care, you almost think of it as a physical thing. You want to take care of yourself physically, but from listening to you, it sounds like self-care is more from emotional and mental state. And you want to make sure. Okay.
Well, I think the two words I think about to really describe it in our lives: vulnerability versus resilience. And I think those words are very, very powerful. And it's a fact that those individuals that are either find themselves to be resilient or vulnerable based on their medical conditions that can affect your overall survival, your overall longevity. And so we want to hopefully help people make sure that they have those resources in place to have that foundation of resiliency. Otherwise, when they get vulnerable, more things are going to happen. We know statistically that when you're in your 40s to 60s, that's when a lot of disease burden starts to happen. And some of the gentlemen have already alluded to that. But things like diabetes, things like hypertension, things like stroke, heart attack, those kind of things happen when you're at your most vulnerable. And as Chad was saying earlier, you have your parents that may be dying when you're in that age range. You have your kids moving off to college. And now you have chronic disease burden coming in. And it's for those individuals that have that resiliency that will do the best. And it goes back to, as we're all saying, relationships. Get your physical. What is your plan? What are your resources look like? And I think that's going to make a big difference when we do it. Let's talk about, on the flip side of self-care, flip side, caregiving. Larry, what does caregiving look like to you?
Yeah, caregiving is very intentional. And besides it being intentional, there is a resilience that's associated with caregiving. Life happens. And when life happens, it doesn't tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, life is going to happen at this time and this date. So the caregiving that we see, that I may see in the clinic, is really pretty amazing, because the people who are providing the caregiving, it's a huge sacrifice. And it is as well as a physical challenge, it's a mental challenge as well. And that mental challenge can be very stressful at times. And the stress that's associated with that may lead to some of the chronic disease challenges that we're talking about on the show. Overcoming that takes awareness from someone else say, hey, you know what? I see you're a little stressed. Have you thought about this? The aspect of caregiving when you're dealing with different age populations is also something that we want to look at, because caring for someone that's young versus caring for someone that's a bit older, that creates different challenges. So I want to point that out.
Chad, what do you think caregiving is? How would you kind of define that, or how do you foresee it?
Yeah, I think, as Larry pointed out, people tend to forget that your most dominant state of natural caregiving is the parental mode. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why, kids don't get their, anabolic hormones till teenage years, right? They build up a 12-year stockpile of emotions that are positive, so you don't kill them for the years before they go to college. And it's difficult when you're caregiving for a parent because there is no emotional return on all of that you're giving. You're in your late 40s and you're taking care of somebody who's maybe slightly depressed, maybe have lost function, and you go see them and they're negative. And nobody asks you about how you're feeling. Nobody asks you about the work that you have to do. It's always, you took too long, you're late, you should have been here. You're like, oh my God. Was at least your kids, they're inherently selfish, but they have moments of that angelic, I love you, daddy. I love, they hug you. You're like, you know what? All this sacrifice, I feel good for 10 seconds. So, it's worth it. And so I would say, my most successful adult caregivers plan time that they get emotionally renewed. It's not just slavery out of guilt. I gotta go see mom. Yes, it's true. You do. Oh, dad needs me. It's true. But to sustain that extended process, you have to not be hesitant on establishing emotional reservoirs that you can tap into.
Excellent. Sean?
Yeah, I want to really jump in here with you guys. Both said something really important here. With there's different levels of caregiving, right? You're a caregiver to your children, and you have you get rewarded on a daily basis for that. But caregiving for a parent or a loved one who's a little bit older, that can be very taxing, both emotionally, physically, and you really need to be aware of that. We see this a lot. Patients are, we see the family dynamic where patient has dementia or Alzheimer, and physically they're there, but mentally they might not be there. So it's the caregivers, whether it's a son or daughter or it's a spouse or somebody else in the family that's helping with those patients, they exude so much energy putting it into the caregiving that you do need to take a step back, and you need time for yourself. You need to make sure that you're healthy enough so you can continue to do this caregiving. So, and again, not everybody's in the same situation. Again, there are programs out there for people who are caring for a loved one that just they're at their wits end. They can't do it anymore. They need a break. So that's where we would come in, and we could provide some social work and some different resources out there to help the caregiver who's helping the patient, because we see that a lot. That family dynamic, even the most loving son or daughter taking care of their father, who is it's taxing on you to see the man you looked up to your entire career kind of decline. You need to take care of him, and it can really take a toll on you. So it's really important that everybody works together in situations like that.
Thanks, Sean. We call that compassion fatigue, and it happens all the time, and it's okay to have that fatigue. As you're talking, Sean, you reminded me of a couple stories, and as a physician, I've seen it firsthand where it's the holidays and there's an elderly patient, and the son and daughter just said enough. And so they show up at the ER with their elderly parent and just drops them off. And, we used to call them holiday drop-offs back when I was training. And and when you a patient, nothing's really wrong with them. Vital signs are stable. Blood pressure is excellent. Sounds like they're complying with their medications, but the family just needs a break. And so we see that all the time. But compassion fatigue and caregiver fatigue. This segment is brought to you by Orville's Healthcare. Welcome to Orville's Healthcare, where personal health coaches help you stay on track with all of your health goals. Concierge and personalized medicine that is covered by your health insurance. Allow Orville's Healthcare to care for you. We care through communication. www.orvilleshealthcare, orvoshealthcare.com, Facebook at Orvos CCM, Twitter at Orvos Healthcare. So I want to transition to a little bit of the actual design. We're talking about having things a little more segregated right now, self-care, caregiving, but the reality is that it all blends together. So I'm going to throw this question out to Chad. How do we best manage caring for ourselves while simultaneously caring for others?
And that's a great question, Dr. Gomez. And I think when it relates to the obligated professional, people pay you for your time. And so once you're on the clock, you have a very hard time controlling when you get to come off of it. And so for the obligated professional or parent, what you do have control over is when that day starts. Because you do have a contract and you get paid so much to begin your day at a certain time. And so you can start ahead of that day with any type of personal design that you wish. And so for anybody who's trying to focus on a priority, if it's a nutrition or exercise or mental state, and doing that type of meditative work, that needs to start, as you alluded to earlier, ahead of your work and family obligation, which then sets up, of course, the evening process of being able to get to sleep. And so if you have to get up, that means you have to get to sleep. And so now you start to build your day with a certain level of efficiency, depending on when you have to get to sleep to begin your day. And so as Sean has been talking about, there's different situations. And so it's hard to say blanketly what you should do, but most people have a extended commute. And so if you start your day at 8 o'clock and you have to drive a half hour to work, let's say, then you're waking up about 6 to 5:30, which puts you in bed right around 10 o'clock. And so you're like, 10 o'clock?
I got to watch late night TV. I got to watch.
Right, everybody's like, 10 o'clock? What am I going to
that old.
on my Facebook and my...
I'm old, but I'm not that old.
And so, but when you look at millionaires, when you look at CEOs, CFOs, you look at professional athletes who have done it over a decade, that design is they're getting to bed at 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. That's when they get to bed. It's not, they're not 12 o'clock watching Leno and watching Fallon, rather. They don't do that because they're controlling and designing the beginning part of their day. They're not reactive. And so disease starts, as Larry talked about earlier, when you can't respond to your expectation. Now you have depression. Now you have physical decline because you haven't designed that day for so long, and your health no longer allows you the ability to react appropriately to it.
Thank you. Larry, what's your thoughts? How do you balance out having self-care, trying to find time for that while caring for others? You're a parent, you're a spouse. Mm-hmm. How do you do it? What's your secret sauce? Tell the whole world right now.
Larry, tell us.
Everybody grab a pen and paper because the words they're going to hear from Larry Love are legit.
So to really piggyback a little bit on what Chad alluded to, when we talk about self-care, we have to realize that it's intentional. The problem with self-care when it doesn't go the right way, it's reactive. Mm-hmm. And so we want it to be intentional to the point to where Chad was saying, it becomes a behavior. And how we start our day means we know how we're going to end our day, when we're going to do it. And so for me as a parent, a spouse, my schedule is hugely busy. But at the beginning of the day, I have to get up about 2 hours earlier before I even leave the door. So that doesn't include just, the hygiene standpoint. It's the focus standpoint. It's the putting into order, okay, which traffic route am I going to take? What am I going to do to alleviate stress? If my day should happen to change some type of way, I've already mentally prepared for that. And I can't just reiterate enough. It goes back to intention. Mm-hmm. Don't be reactive. Be very intentional about everything you do. It's so funny that people used to laugh and say, oh my gosh, this person writes down their plan for the day. But guess what? That plan keeps you on track. Mm-hmm. That plan allows you to make those phone calls. That plan allows you to check on a wife, check on the kids, and it keeps you on track to the point of accountability. Most self-care becomes dysfunctional when there's a lack of accountability, and that's where people get into trouble.
And we talk about accountability from a lot of things in life. I mean, that's a theme across any kind of business, any kind of career path you're on. And that accountability, of course, is important when it comes to your health. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we talked about in the past is having that foundation going to see your doctor, get a physical, because when you know the vulnerable stages are going to come, you need your physician to be there for you to back you up. Sean, what's your thoughts about balancing out? You're a very busy man. Again, I've known Sean for a long time. You're a very busy man, but you're a parent, you're a professional. How do you balance out self-care and caregiving at the same time?
Yeah. It's always evolving, and I'm trying to get it better every day. But I think one of the biggest things that I've done really over the past year is just to try to be present. So when we're all busy individuals at work, and Larry, you put it very good or very well that you're to stay on track. You got to have a plan. You got to stick to that. And you got to, when are you going to make that call? I'm going to make that call at 10 o'clock because that's when I said I was going to make it. And you try to be a little bit more proactive. But when you get home, try to shut it off. Try to be present with your kid, and that's kind of the thing that's really I've been trying to evolve over the past year, because I used to bring work home with me all the time, emails, phone calls, caregiving. My profession is a 24/7 a job. I mean, patients are there. We see patients 7 days a week, and sometimes we see them late at night, and issues arise, and you got to be prepared for that. But when I get home between 5:30 and 6, I'm there for my kids, and I try to not worry about the emails, not worry about the phone calls. They'll be there in a little bit. Every once in a while I'll check in and make sure there's not an emergency, but just being there with them. And then, also one of the other big things is, and one of my mentors taught me this is, when you're with your kids, get down with them, get on the, they're smaller, get down with them, talk to them, play with them, get down on their level, but just be there for them, not just physically present, but emotionally and mentally present. Ask about what they did at school today, about what they, what was the best part of the day. Another big thing that has really helped over the past few months is, my son he's 4 years old, and bedtime's not very fun for him, right? He doesn't want to go to bed.
Sounds like my daughter, by the way, my 6-year-old. Bedtime is definitely not fun.
And he was, no matter what we did, put him down in one bed, put him in our bed, he was always running around. So one of the biggest things that my wife and I do is we just spend time with him, lay down in his bed with him, talk to him, shut off all the devices, shut off all the lights, and just lay there with him. And we found that you start talking for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then he kind of calms down, and then he sits there and he laughs at you, and then bedtime's much easier now because we're present for him. We're there, making sure that he has that support when he's going to bed, and he knows that we're right next to him, and we're going to be there again when he wakes up in the morning. So those are some of the things that I do to balance the work-life balance.
Excellent. Some of us do have, and this is real talk, some of us do have a hard time shutting it off. I can speak volumes on that. With the advent of the electronic medical record, I have to sometimes bring stuff home, but I make it my obligation to not do it while my kids are still awake. I try my darnest. But the challenge of that is the downside is that, that may cut into my own time after they go to sleep. I might have to log on and fire off a couple charts for, 45 minutes or an hour. That cuts into some other time, marriage time, recreation time. Maybe I want to read a book or read the latest comic or whatever's out there, bestseller. But that cuts into that time. But I'm willing to take that on knowingly. Again, to talk about accountability, I'm willing to take that on because I want to be there for my kids.
And if I may add a point, as Larry talked about, the truth be told, professionals, you get paid for your time, you invest in your time. And a lot of us, when we come home, we're tired.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't want to give right when I walk in the door.
You want to wrestle? Right now, your kids say, Daddy, you want to wrestle right now?
Daddy, review my homework. Daddy, look at my, you know what? I just worked 10 hours, kid. I need a little time for Daddy. But knowing they're also going to be asleep in 30 minutes, if I don't hit the door with a certain urgency and energy, then that time is lost.
Intentional. Yeah.
And so as Larry's talking about, as Sean is talking about, You need to, as a professional person, imprint the right food, the right mental state, and so you can give when it's called on, as you're pointing out. Yeah, you could do medical records when you come home. That patient is fresh in your mind. But you know your kids are going to be asleep in 30 minutes.
Yes.
So if you don't get out of that office, get to the house, spend that 30-minute time with the family, with the child, versus staying at the office when it's easier, it's fresh. You can do it, knock it out right away, and then come home and say, "Oh, what's going on, baby? How's the day?" "Oh, well, you missed it." "Oh, well." I mean, so we know the games that we could play as professional, bread-winning individuals. And so it is intentional. As Larry was saying, you do have to carry this accountability. And so you can be whole and maintain this as you're aging and moving between different life frame expectations.
All right, gentlemen, we got about 5 minutes left. So what I want to do is I just want to kind of get your final thoughts on various things. But I call this section the assessment and plan. I coined that last week. I didn't coin assessment and plan in the medical standpoint, but just on my own show, coined that the assessment and plan section, where we kind of summarize and give a couple take-home points. So I'm going to start with Larry. Larry, if there's 3 take-home points that you can give people, the people that are listening to us or watching us, what are some 3 take-home points that people can utilize right now as far as trying to balance out self-care and caregiving?
That's an excellent question. First off, self-care, it starts with you. A lot of times self-care for others means, okay, what am I going to do for everyone else? Self-care has to be intentional and direct about starting with you. The caregiving aspect is there's between convenience and comfortable, and it evolves. And once you know that there may be a point that your caregiving may be uncomfortable, you need to kind of reassess that. If it becomes so uncomfortable to the point where it's throwing off your day, throwing off your normal, lifestyle, just see the right professional. And the right professional can sometimes mean, hey, I need to see a personal trainer, get my exercise on. I may need to see a massage therapist to get, some recovery going on. I may need to just talk to a life coach. But as you said, my health has to come first. And that starts with getting a physical. You have to know what you have in the tank before you know how far you need to go. And that's what's really key about self-care and also caregiving.
Excellent. Chad, final thoughts?
I look at self-care and caregiving like a photo, kind of like a photo. And the same content can be there, but if that camera's not in focus, nothing is clear. It's only when you start to have a priority and say, you know what, I'm going to take a picture of this, then the background self-selects. And as Sean is saying, different people have different resources. And for some people, they can handle taking care of an aging adult parent. Their boss is flexible. They don't commute that far away. They have kids that are healthy. They have supportive spouses. Other people, their mix is not the same. And you may have to provide that same level of outcome with the next person, you may require 2 or 3 additional resources. And so you don't have to apologize or have guilt because your picture is not the same as the person next to you. Take an inventory. There's resources available. Put your personal plan in place, understand where you need help, and recruit those individuals either through professional or relationships to help you augment what you need.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sean,
those are all great, and I kind of want to really expand on those. The more from a caregiving standpoint, put yourself in the person's that you're caregiving for, their shoes, whether it's your kids or whether it's your parents. Put yourself in their shoes because what's important to you might not be important to them, and it's really important in the caregiving process to making sure that you understand the needs of others. And I kind of alluded to it before. You always gotta be present. Wherever you're at. I do this. I gave the examples of my kids, but even at the office. Walking just walking from my office to get a cup of coffee. Somebody stops me and asks me a question and they want to talk. You got to be present. I'm not worried about the cup of coffee or the 3 phone calls I got to make when I get back to my office. You're in front of me now. You're the most important person, so be present no matter where you're at. And then don't overlook the little things. Again, back to the, with your kids, it might be little to you, but it might be everything to them. Right. So my son with his trucks, so and so we played trucks all day long, but that's all he's got. So that's really important to him. So little things to you may not be little to other people.
Thanks, Sean. And my lasting thoughts are just that every day is an opportunity to do something positive for your life, to do something positive with your family. We're blessed to have these opportunities. And so I don't want anybody to take anything for granted. Yes, we understand that there's time constraints. You're occupied. You've got a lot of things to do. We understand that at this table. But if we can do it, it sounds like a cliche. If we can do it, you can do it too. But it's true. Surround yourself with the people that can support you and get you through the challenges in life, because you will get your happiness. You will get that time back for yourself. So I want everybody to just be well. Thank you again. I want to just say my guest, Larry Love. Larry Love, excellent gentleman, owner of Total Body Wellness and Performance, www.totalbodywellness.net. Chad Earl in the middle, owner of Integrated Wellness Online, www.integratedwellnessonline.com, also the owner of DuPage Fitness and Rehab. Sean Schuster, Vice President at Residential Home Health and Residential Hospice, www.residentialhomehealth.com. Thanks to my sponsor, Orvos Healthcare, www.orvoshealthcare.com. Hey, everybody, it's been great. Again, my name is Dr. G. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Visit me on my website, www.drmarkgomez.com. Next week, we're going to be exploring mindfulness. Great show. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thank you so much.